The night was silent. Snow covered the ground like a white blanket, and the world outside the small farmhouse seemed frozen in time. The wind whispered softly through the trees, but nothing else moved. Inside the house, a man named Daniel was asleep, wrapped in heavy blankets. The fire in the fireplace had almost died, leaving only glowing embers. His dog, a loyal shepherd named Max, slept near the door, his ears twitching now and then as if listening to something hidden in the night. At first, everything was calm. But then, exactly at midnight, Max shot up from the floor with a sharp bark. His ears stood straight, his body tense. He barked again, louder this time, and Daniel's eyes snapped open. The man frowned, half asleep and annoyed. "Max, quiet," he whispered, hoping the dog would settle down. But Max did not stop. His barks filled the quiet night, echoing through the wooden walls of the house. It was not his usual bark at passing deer or a stray fox. This bark was different, urgent, fierce. Daniel sat up, a strange unease crawling through his chest. He had lived with Max long enough to know the difference between a playful bark and a warning. This was a warning. Something was out there. He pulled on his heavy coat, slipped into his boots, and grabbed the flashlight from the table. When he opened the door, the cold night air hit him like a wall of ice. His breath turned to fog instantly. Max darted out, his paws sinking into the snow, barking toward the far side of the field. Daniel followed, shining the weak beam of the flashlight across the white land. Snowflakes drifted from the dark sky, glistening under the thin light. At first he saw nothing, just the endless white ground and the black shadows of trees standing tall and silent. But Max was growling now, his body low, his eyes fixed on something. Daniel walked further, his boots crunching in the snow. "What is it, boy?" he whispered, his voice shaking slightly. Then he saw it. At the edge of the field where the snow was deepest, something moved. Something small. Daniel's heart raced as he pointed the light toward it. For a moment, he thought it was just a bundle of rags left behind. But then the bundle shifted. A weak, trembling hand rose slightly, then fell again. Daniel froze, his breath caught in his throat. He rushed forward, Max by his side. When the light finally revealed what lay in the snow, Daniel stopped in shock. It was a child, but not like any child he had ever seen. The figure was small, thin, and trembling. Its skin was pale, almost glowing faintly under the snow as if it carried its own light. Its eyes, half open, shone with a strange silver color that reflected the flashlight in an unnatural way. Its hair was thin and almost white, sticking to its frozen face. The child's lips moved, but no sound came out at first. Then with a faint, broken whisper, one word escaped. Daniel leaned closer, his heart pounding. The word was strange, foreign, like nothing he had ever heard. Max stopped barking now and whined softly, sniffing at the child's hand. The glow around the child seemed to flicker like a dying candle. Daniel dropped to his knees in the snow. "Oh God, you're freezing," he muttered, quickly wrapping his coat around the small body. The skin was icy cold to the touch, colder than any human could survive. He could feel the child shivering, fighting for life. "What are you?" Daniel whispered without thinking. His voice trembled, not from the cold, but from fear and wonder. The child's silver eyes opened wider for a second, locking onto his. They seemed ancient, far older than any child's eyes should be. And then the lips moved again, whispering that same strange word, only louder this time. The sound sent a shiver through Daniel's spine, though he had no idea what it meant. The dog pressed closer, licking the child's hand as if trying to comfort it. Daniel felt torn. His instincts screamed to take the child inside to save it before it froze to death. But another voice inside his head whispered of danger. This was not natural. This was not normal. This was something else, something beyond Earth. He looked around quickly. The field was still empty, silent except for the soft fall of snow. Yet Daniel could not shake the feeling that they were being watched. The hair on the back of his neck stood on end. Why was this strange child lying in the middle of his field at midnight, half buried in snow? Who or what had left it there? He tightened his coat around the child and stood up, carrying the fragile body in his arms. Max barked once more toward the dark forest as if warning Daniel of unseen eyes. Daniel turned and hurried back toward the farmhouse, his boots crunching faster in the snow. The child's faint glow lit the path in his arms. As he reached the door, Daniel looked back one last time at the field. The snow was falling harder now, covering the spot where the child had been. The empty darkness of the forest loomed beyond, silent and watching. He pushed the door closed behind him and locked it tight. His heart was racing, his hands trembling. The child stirred weakly in his arms, whispering that same word again. Daniel had no idea what it meant, but he knew one thing for sure. His life had just changed forever. The house was warm, but Daniel could not take the child inside his small bedroom. He was afraid his old neighbors might hear if the child cried or made strange sounds. And deep in his heart, Daniel knew this child was no ordinary human. He looked at the fragile figure in his arms, still glowing faintly under the blanket, and made a quick decision. He carried the child into the barn. The barn smelled of hay, wood, and old iron tools. It was dark. Only a thin lantern lit the corners. Max padded in first, tail stiff, ears alert, as if he was guarding something important. Daniel gently placed the child on a bed of hay and wrapped him with more blankets. He could see steam rising from the child's breath, weak but steady. For a long moment, Daniel just stared. The glow under the child's pale skin was not imagination. It pulsed faintly like a heartbeat of light. The strange mark on his arm caught Daniel's eye. It looked like a circle with lines through it, almost like a map. It wasn't a scar or tattoo. It seemed natural, part of the child's body itself. "Who are you?" Daniel whispered again. Though he knew he would get no answer he could understand. The child stirred. His silver eyes opened slowly, blinking against the lantern light. Max moved closer, sniffing and whining. To Daniel's surprise, the child lifted a trembling hand and touched the dog's head. Max licked the small fingers gently, tail wagging now. It was strange. The dog trusted him completely. The child tried to speak, but the words were broken, heavy with a strange accent. Daniel leaned closer, but he only caught fragments, sounds he did not know. Then slowly the child raised his finger and drew something in the dust on the wooden floor. A symbol. A sharp shape that looked like a triangle with lines through it. After that, the child drew another symbol. A circle crossed out. Daniel frowned, trying to make sense of it. The child's silver eyes stared at him with desperation, as if begging him to understand. He pointed to the symbol again, then to himself, then made a gesture. Hands pushing outward like something chasing him away. You ran from something," Daniel muttered. His voice was shaking. "You're hiding." The child's weak nod confirmed it. Before Daniel could think further, Max's ears twitched. The dog growled low, staring at the barn door. Daniel froze. Outside, faint lights flickered in the distance, red and white glows moving through the forest. They weren't car headlights. They moved silently, floating above the ground. Daniel's stomach tightened. Whoever had left this child in the snow, they might not be far. He quickly put out the lantern, throwing the barn into shadow. Only the child's faint glow lit the hay. Daniel crouched by the small window and peered out. There, beyond the field, between the trees, he saw them, shadows moving with strange precision. Tall figures, their outlines sharp against the falling snow. They carried lights that glowed unnaturally, sweeping across the ground like searching eyes. Hunters. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. His heart hammered in his chest. He turned back to the child, who was now trembling harder. The boy pressed a hand to his glowing mark as if it pained him. Max growled again, but Daniel hushed him quickly. "Quiet, boy," he whispered. The hunter's lights grew closer, sweeping across the edge of the barn. Daniel's mind raced. He had no weapons except his old shotgun, and that was inside the house. He thought about running, but the snow was deep and the hunters would see their tracks immediately. The child suddenly grabbed Daniel's wrist. His touch was cold but strong, almost desperate. The silver eyes locked onto his, and the child whispered a single word in his strange language, repeating it again and again. Daniel didn't understand, but he could feel the meaning in the tone. Danger. Hide. Now. Daniel swallowed hard. He pulled aside a wooden hatch near the barn floor, revealing a small storage cellar where he used to keep potatoes. It was dark and cramped, but it might hide them for a short time. He lifted the child gently, lowering him inside. Max followed, slipping into the dark hole without hesitation. Daniel climbed in last and closed the hatch above them, leaving only thin slits of light between the wood. They waited. The sound of footsteps in the snow grew louder, heavy, measured. Then came a strange metallic hum, like machines breathing. Through the crack in the hatch, Daniel saw shadows pass by the barn window. One of them stopped. A beam of light swept across the walls, almost reaching the hatch. Daniel's pulse thundered in his ears. He held his breath. The child's tiny hand gripped his tightly in the dark. Max pressed against his leg, teeth bared but silent. For a long moment, everything was still. Then came the sound of the barn door creaking open. A tall shadow stepped inside. The barn creaked as the heavy door opened wider. Cold air rushed in, carrying snowflakes that sparkled faintly in the dark. Daniel held his breath, frozen in the cellar with the child and Max. His heart pounded so loud he feared the intruder would hear it. Through the thin cracks of the wooden hatch, Daniel saw a shadow move across the barn floor, tall, broad-shouldered, not human. The figure's outline was sharp and strange, its arms long, its movements too smooth, like a machine mixed with flesh. A pale glow came from its mask, casting beams of light across the hay. Daniel squeezed the child's hand gently, telling him without words to stay quiet. Max pressed against his leg, silent but tense, his teeth flashing in the faint glow. The hunters were inside. The tall figure stepped further into the barn. Its boots crunched softly on the wooden floor. Then another shadow followed and another, 3 of them. They carried rods that glowed with red energy, humming low like they were alive. The sound made Daniel's skin crawl. The hunters spread out, sweeping their lights across the stalls and the walls. One of them stopped near the corner where Daniel kept his old tools. It bent down, scanning the ground. The glow from its mask revealed the snow Daniel had tracked inside earlier. The hunter's head snapped toward the floor as if it sensed something hidden beneath. Daniel gritted his teeth. If they opened the cellar hatch, there would be no escape. He reached into his coat, his fingers brushing the old pocket knife he always carried. It was nothing compared to their strange weapons, but he held it anyway, his hand shaking. The child's silver eyes glowed faintly in the darkness. Suddenly the boy moved. With weak fingers, he began tracing shapes in the dirt of the cellar floor. Daniel looked down and saw him drawing a symbol again, this time different from before. A circle with lines shooting outward like rays of light. Then the boy pointed at Daniel, then at himself, and whispered a single word in his strange tongue. Over and over. His voice was urgent now. Daniel could not understand the word, but he understood the meaning in his tone. Protect. Together. Before Daniel could react, one of the hunters stopped right above the hatch. It tilted its head, listening. The barn fell silent. Even the wind outside seemed to stop. Then slowly the hunter raised its weapon. A low hum grew louder, filling the air like thunder waiting to strike. Daniel's grip on the knife tightened. His pulse hammered. He could almost feel the moment they would be discovered. Suddenly, Max growled. A deep rumbling growl that shook the silence. Daniel's first instinct was to hush him, but then he realized Max wasn't warning them. He was warning the hunters. The dog's growl grew louder, fiercer, and then he barked. The hunters reacted instantly. 2 of them turned toward the sound, weapons raised. One fired, and a blast of red light scorched the wooden wall, leaving it smoking. The noise was deafening inside the barn. Daniel's chance had come. With a surge of desperate courage, he pushed open the hatch and leapt out, knife in hand. The hunters turned too late. He slashed at the nearest one, hitting its arm. Sparks flew as the blade struck something metallic beneath the skin. The creature hissed, stumbling back. "Run!" Daniel shouted to the child. The boy crawled out of the cellar, clutching his glowing arm. His silver eyes blazed brighter now, as if fear was fueling some hidden power. He stretched out his small hand toward the hunters, and for the first time, Daniel saw a flash of energy burst from his palm, a crackling light that struck the barn wall and exploded like lightning. The hunters reeled back, their masks flickering. Max lunged at one of them, teeth sinking into its leg. The creature staggered, swinging its weapon wildly, but the dog held on. Daniel grabbed the child and pulled him toward the back door of the barn. They stumbled into the snow, running through the blizzard. Behind them, the hunters shouted in strange voices, their language harsh and metallic. Red beams of light sliced through the night sky, burning into the snow where Daniel had just been. His lungs burned, his legs heavy, but he didn't stop. The child clung to him, whispering in his ear. Daniel didn't know the words, but he knew they were a warning. The hunters would not stop. They would follow. Finally, when they reached the edge of the forest, Daniel ducked behind a thick tree. Snow clung to his face and beard, melting into cold water. His breath came in sharp gasps. He looked down at the child. "Why are they after you?" he asked, his voice breaking. "What are you?" The child looked back with those silver eyes, full of sorrow. Slowly, he touched the glowing mark on his arm. Then he pointed at the hunters chasing them and shook his head. They want to destroy you, Daniel whispered, the meaning sinking in. The boy nodded weakly. Then in broken English the child spoke a single clear word for the first time. Danger. Daniel froze. His blood turned cold. The child could speak even if only a little. And if this word was clear, then the others he whispered before were not nonsense. They were messages, warnings. The child leaned against him, trembling, whispering again in his strange tongue. Daniel didn't understand the words, but the meaning was clear enough. The danger was only beginning. The forest swallowed them whole. Snow fell harder now, thick flakes blinding Daniel as he ran. Branches whipped at his face and his boots sank deep into the icy ground with every step. Max darted ahead, barking sharply, then running back, guiding them like a wolf leading its pack. The child clung to Daniel's coat, his silver eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. Behind them, the hunters followed. Their red lights cut through the trees, sweeping the forest like knives of fire. Strange voices echoed, metallic and sharp, calling to each other. Every sound made Daniel's heart hammer faster. He could feel the heat of their weapons slicing the air close behind him. A beam of red light struck a tree near his head. Wood exploded into splinters. Daniel ducked, pulling the child closer. He didn't stop running.
"Hold on,"
he shouted, though his breath was ragged, his chest burning from the cold. Max barked again, darting to the side. The dog's paws moved fast across the snow, leaving fresh tracks in another direction. Daniel realized what he was doing. He was trying to draw the hunters away. "Good boy," Daniel whispered, choking on the words as fear and pride twisted inside him. The child looked back over Daniel's shoulder. His eyes widened. Daniel risked a glance and saw one of the hunters moving closer, faster than the others. It leapt over a fallen log with unnatural grace, its glowing mask sweeping side to side. It was tracking them. It wouldn't be fooled by Max's trick for long. Daniel pushed harder, his muscles screaming. The snow grew deeper, slowing him down. His boots slipped, almost sending him crashing to the ground. The child cried out in his strange language, pointing ahead. Through the trees, Daniel saw the faint glimmer of a frozen river, its wide surface reflecting the moonlight. They reached the bank and stumbled onto the ice. The surface groaned under their weight, cracks spreading in thin white lines. Daniel's stomach lurched, but he had no choice. Behind him, the hunters were closing in, their red beams glowing brighter. "Please don't break," Daniel muttered, gripping the child tighter as he ran across the frozen river. Each step made the ice complain, but it held barely. Max reappeared on the far side, barking wildly, urging them on. Halfway across, a red beam fired again. It struck the ice just behind them, shattering the surface in an explosion of steam and shards. Water gushed up, black and freezing, swallowing part of the river. Daniel's feet slipped and he almost fell. The child screamed, clinging tighter to him. The hunters didn't stop at the edge. One of them stepped directly onto the ice, its heavy boots sinking cracks deeper into the frozen surface. The others followed, their glowing weapons raised. Daniel's mind raced. He couldn't outrun them forever. He looked at the child, who was trembling but staring ahead with determination. The boy pressed his small hand against the glowing mark on his arm, then touched the ice beneath them. His silver eyes burned brighter. A faint vibration shivered through the frozen river. The cracks spread faster, glowing faintly with the same light that pulsed from the boy's skin. Daniel's eyes widened. "You're doing this?" he whispered. The boy nodded weakly, whispering a single word Daniel couldn't understand. Then the ice groaned loudly, splitting apart. Huge slabs broke free, tilting dangerously. Daniel realized what the boy intended. The ice would collapse, dragging the hunters into the freezing river. But if he wasn't careful, they would be dragged down too. "Hold on," Daniel shouted. He sprinted the last distance, leaping onto the far bank just as the ice beneath the hunters shattered. A roar of water and breaking ice filled the night. The hunters stumbled, their weapons flaring wildly. One fell into the black river, its glowing mask vanishing under the icy current. Another tried to leap back, but the collapsing ice pulled it down with a screech of metal. Only one managed to cling to the far side of the bank, hauling itself up with terrifying strength. Its glowing mask flickered and its weapon pointed straight at Daniel. Before it could fire, Max lunged. The dog came out of nowhere, slamming into the hunter's arm with a snarl. The red beam shot harmlessly into the trees. Daniel didn't waste a second. He grabbed a heavy branch from the ground and swung with all his strength. The branch cracked against the hunter's mask, sending sparks flying. The creature fell back into the snow with a heavy crash. Breathing hard, Daniel looked down at the child. His silver eyes were dim now, his glow weaker. Using his strange power had drained him. He leaned into Daniel's chest, whispering softly. This time Daniel caught one word in broken English. Run. Daniel nodded, scooping him up once more. He called Max, who returned panting but unhurt. Together they pushed deeper into the forest, leaving the shattered river and fallen hunters behind. Snow swallowed their tracks quickly, but Daniel knew it wasn't over. The hunters would not stop. They would keep coming. As they moved further into the darkness, the child lifted his hand weakly and pointed toward the hills beyond the forest. His silver eyes glimmered faintly as he whispered something again and again like a plea. Daniel could not understand the words, but he knew the child wanted him to go somewhere specific. Somewhere hidden, somewhere safe. He tightened his grip on the boy and nodded. We'll get there, I promise. But deep inside, Daniel knew the chase was far from finished. The forest grew darker as Daniel pushed forward, carrying the weak child in his arms. His legs ached, his lungs burned from the freezing air, but he didn't stop. Max trotted close, looking back often, ears twitching at every sound. The hunters had fallen behind, but Daniel knew it was only a matter of time before they found the trail again. The child stirred against his chest, whispering softly. His voice was weak, broken, but Daniel heard the same word over and over. The boy pointed with a trembling finger toward the hills beyond the forest. Daniel followed the gesture, struggling through the snow until the trees opened up to reveal a wide, frozen lake. The surface stretched endlessly, smooth and white under the pale moonlight. The boy pointed again, this time more urgently. His silver eyes glimmered, filled with strange determination. You want me to go there? Daniel whispered. The boy nodded faintly. Daniel hesitated. The lake looked dangerous. The ice had already cracked once that night. But something in the child's eyes told him this was important. More than survival, it was destiny. He stepped onto the lake carefully, the ice groaning beneath his boots. Max whined but followed close behind. The boy lifted his hand and pressed his palm to the ice as Daniel walked. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a faint glow spread across the frozen surface, lines of light stretching outward like veins under glass. Daniel's eyes widened. What is this? The boy whispered a word in his own language, then said in broken English, Home. Before Daniel could ask, the glowing lines converged in the middle of the lake. The ice cracked loudly, splitting in a perfect circle. With a deep rumble, something rose from beneath the frozen water. Daniel stumbled back, clutching the boy tighter. Max barked wildly, circling around them. Slowly the object broke free, a massive metallic pod covered in ice and snow. It glowed faintly, humming with energy. Strange markings lit up along its surface, the same symbols the boy had drawn in the barn. Daniel's breath caught. Dear God. The pod opened with a hiss, steam rolling out. Inside, he saw strange seats, glowing panels, and objects that looked like weapons or tools. It wasn't human technology. It was something far older, far more advanced. The boy slipped from Daniel's arms and stepped weakly toward the pod. His glow brightened as he touched the metal. The pod seemed to respond to him, its lights growing stronger. He pressed his hand to the surface, and the strange mark on his arm pulsed in rhythm with the machine. Daniel could only watch in awe. His world had been quiet and simple only hours ago. Now he stood on a frozen lake, staring at alien technology powered by a child who had fallen from the stars. But the moment of wonder did not last. The trees at the far edge of the lake lit up with red beams. The hunters had returned. Their voices echoed across the ice, sharp and metallic. They were moving fast, their glowing masks slicing through the darkness. Damn it, Daniel muttered, grabbing the shotgun he had strapped to his back earlier. He knew it would barely slow them, but he had no choice. The boy turned to him, shaking his head. No, not fight, he whispered. He pointed at the pod. Inside, safe. Daniel hesitated. Could he trust this machine? What if it trapped them? What if it wasn't meant for humans? But the hunters were closing in, their weapons glowing brighter. He didn't have time to doubt. Max, inside! He ordered. The dog barked and leapt into the pod without hesitation. Daniel followed, carrying the boy. The inside was warmer, the air strange but breathable. The walls pulsed with light, almost alive. As soon as they entered, the pod sealed shut. A deep hum filled the space and the floor vibrated under Daniel's boots. The boy sat in one of the strange seats, placing his glowing hand on a panel. The pod came to life, its symbols flashing in quick patterns. Outside, the hunters reached the pod. They pounded on the metal, striking with their weapons. Red beams scorched the surface, but the pod held strong. The boy closed his eyes, concentrating. The mark on his arm glowed brighter, and the pod responded with a sudden surge of power. The hunters staggered back as a wave of energy burst from the machine, pushing them away like leaves in a storm. Daniel stared, speechless. The boy opened his eyes again, weak but steady. "Safe for now," he whispered. Daniel looked around the pod, heart still racing. Safe, yes, but for how long? The hunters had been thrown back, but they would return. And now Daniel knew the truth. This child wasn't just lost. He was something far more important. Something the hunters were desperate to destroy. Daniel placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You're not alone anymore. We'll figure this out together." The boy's silver eyes met his, and for the first time Daniel saw hope in them. But outside, beyond the frozen lake, red light still burned in the darkness. The escape had only just begun. Inside the pod, silence fell after the blast of energy faded. The hunters outside had been thrown back, their glowing masks vanishing into the snowy darkness. For the first time since midnight, Daniel felt a thin breath of relief. He leaned against the metal wall, chest heaving, while Max lay at his feet, panting but alert. The child sat in the strange seat, his silver eyes half closed, his glow fading as exhaustion overtook him. Daniel studied the boy closely. His small hands rested on the glowing panel, the strange mark on his arm pulsing slowly like the beat of a heart. The pod seemed to respond to him, humming softly as if it knew him, as if it was alive. Finally, Daniel spoke. His voice was low, uncertain. "You're not just lost, are you? You're not just some child. You're something more." The boy opened his eyes. For a moment, he looked at Daniel as if weighing whether to speak. Then, slowly, in broken English, he said, "I am not child." Daniel blinked, startled. The boy's words were clumsy, but the meaning was sharp. "Not a child?" The boy shook his head. He pointed to the mark on his arm. "Air," he said carefully. Important." His silver eyes grew brighter as he struggled for words. Hunters. They want end me. If I end, people fall." Daniel's breath caught. He stared at the glowing mark, at the strange machine, at the boy who suddenly seemed so much older than his small body suggested. Not just a runaway, not just a lost soul. He was something like a prince, an heir to power beyond earth. "But why here?" Daniel whispered. "Why come to me?" The boy looked down, his voice trembling. "Crash, my ship, cold, alone, needed, safe, needed, family." His eyes lifted to Daniel then, shining not with alien glow but with something deeply human. Loneliness. The word struck Daniel harder than any weapon. Family. The same word the boy had whispered on the snowy field. The word Daniel had not understood then. Now he did. Daniel felt his chest tighten. He had no wife anymore, no children, only Max and an empty farm. His life had been quiet, filled with silence. And now this boy from the stars was calling him family. Max whined softly, pressing his head against the boy's knee. The child smiled weakly, his small hand stroking the dog's fur. For a brief moment, the barn, the hunters, the danger, all of it felt far away. But the peace shattered quickly. The pod's walls flickered with warning lights. Strange alien symbols flashed across the panels. Daniel didn't understand them, but the boy's face grew tense. He tapped the glowing panel weakly, whispering words Daniel couldn't follow. "What is it?" Daniel asked sharply. The boy looked at him, eyes full of fear now. "They call more. Many hunters, more come. Not stop." Daniel's heart sank. Of course, the hunters wouldn't quit. They would send more, stronger, until the boy was gone. Until Earth itself burned, if that's what it took to erase him. "Then what do we do?" Daniel asked, his voice hard. The boy hesitated, then whispered, "Signal. I send my people. Find me, but cost. Daniel pressed. The boy closed his eyes, struggling for words. "Signal, show. Not just to my people. Hunters too. All will know. They come. Fast fight." Daniel understood. To save the boy, to bring his allies, they had to risk bringing an army of enemies as well. It was a call to war. For a long moment, Daniel said nothing. His life had been simple. He had not asked for this. But when he looked at the boy, trembling, clutching his glowing arm, whispering family, the choice became clear. Daniel knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. Do it, send the signal. We'll face whatever comes. The boy's silver eyes widened. You help me? Even danger? Daniel nodded firmly. You're not alone. Not anymore. The boy's lips trembled into a faint smile. He pressed his glowing hand to the pod's control panel. The hum grew louder, the lights brighter. Symbols raced across the walls. Outside, the lake shook with vibrations. A pillar of blue light burst from the pod into the sky, piercing the clouds above. Miles away in the snowy forest, the hunters froze. Their glowing masks turned upward, their voices rising in alarm. They had seen it. The signal had been sent. Inside the pod, Daniel shielded his eyes from the bright light. The boy slumped weakly in his seat, drained but satisfied. He whispered a final word in broken English, voice soft but steady. Hope. Daniel looked at him, his chest heavy with fear and determination. He didn't know what would come from the stars, friend or foe, but he knew one thing. The boy had placed his trust in him, and Daniel would not let him down. Outside, the red lights of the hunters began to gather again in the darkness. But above the clouds, something else stirred, something bigger, brighter, and far more powerful. The truth was clear now. The boy was no orphan. He was an heir, and his war had just reached Earth. The sky above the frozen lake glowed with the pillar of blue light. It pierced the clouds, reaching into the endless dark of space. The sound was like thunder held forever in the air, vibrating through Daniel's bones. He stood inside the pod, shotgun clutched in his hands, Max pressed against his leg, while the boy sat weakly in the glowing seat. Outside, the hunters gathered. Red lights filled the forest edge, dozens of them now. Their voices rose, sharp and metallic, echoing through the night like war horns. They were calling to each other, preparing to strike. Daniel's hands tightened on the shotgun. He knew it was almost useless, yet it was all he had. His heart raced, but he forced himself to stand tall. The boy had chosen him, trusted him. He would not run now. The pod's walls flashed with warnings again. The boy opened his silver eyes and whispered, They come. More. Daniel knelt beside him. And your people? Will they come? The boy gave a small nod. Yes, but must hold until they arrive. His tiny hands trembled as he tried to power the pod again. The glowing mark on his arm pulsed brighter, feeding energy into the machine. Outside, the first hunters moved onto the ice. Their glowing weapons hummed, red light spreading across the frozen surface. The ground shook as more of them marched closer. Daniel took a deep breath, raised his shotgun, and whispered, Max, with me. The dog growled low, ready. The hunters struck first. Red beams shot across the lake, smashing against the pod's shield. The metal vibrated, glowing faintly but held. Daniel flinched at the noise, covering the boy protectively. Then with a screech, the hunters charged. Daniel burst out of the pod before he could think. He fired into the nearest shadow. The blast roared in the frozen night, sending sparks from one hunter's mask. Max lunged beside him, teeth sinking into another's arm. The hunters roared in their strange voices, red lights flashing wildly. For every one Daniel struck, more came. They moved like machines, tireless and relentless. He fought with everything he had, swinging the shotgun like a club when the shells ran out, kicking, shoving, grabbing anything to survive. His breath burned, his arms ached, but he refused to fall. The boy inside the pod pressed his glowing hand harder against the panel. The pod answered with a surge of energy. Blue light burst outward in a wave, knocking hunters back into the snow. Their weapons hissed and flickered, but the boy was weakening. His glow dimmed. His body trembled. He could not hold the power much longer. Daniel saw it. He shouted over the chaos, Stay with me! Don't give up. The boy's silver eyes met his. He whispered one word, voice trembling. Family. Daniel's chest tightened. Rage burned through his fear. He charged again, swinging the shotgun with all his strength. Max barked fiercely, biting and clawing. Together, man and dog fought like cornered wolves, buying every second. Then the sky split open. A new light shone above, brighter than the moon. A massive shape descended through the clouds. A ship, vast and gleaming, its hull glowing with the same silver-blue light as the boy's mark. It filled the sky, blocking the stars. The hunters froze, their glowing masks turned upward, voices shrieking in alarm. The ship opened with a roar of engines. Beams of light rained down, striking the ice. Hunters were lifted into the air, trapped in fields of glowing energy. Others scattered, fleeing into the forest. The war had turned in an instant. Daniel stumbled back, staring in awe. The boy's people had arrived. The pod door opened and a ramp of light stretched outward. Figures stepped down. Tall, silver-eyed beings clad in armor that shimmered like starlight. They moved with calm power, their weapons humming softly. One of them knelt before the boy, touching his shoulder with deep respect. "Heir," the alien said in a voice that was strong yet gentle. "We found you." The boy smiled weakly, then looked at Daniel. His silver eyes filled with tears. Slowly he rose, walking unsteadily toward the tall figure, but before leaving he turned back and wrapped his small arms around Daniel's neck. "Family," he whispered again. This time the word was clear, perfect, human. Daniel's throat tightened. He hugged the boy back fiercely. "You'll always have one here," he said softly. The aliens led the boy up into the ship. Max barked once as if saying goodbye. The boy turned and smiled faintly, lifting a hand in farewell. Then the ship began to rise, its light flooding the frozen lake. Daniel watched as it vanished into the sky, leaving silence behind. The hunters were gone, the forest still once more. Only the broken ice and the cold night remained. He stood there, shotgun heavy in his hand, Max at his side. His life would never be the same again. The world would never know what happened that night, but Daniel knew. A child from the stars had come to him, calling him family. And for one brief, impossible moment, humanity had stood between darkness and hope. As he turned back toward his farmhouse, the snow falling quietly around him, Daniel whispered to himself the word that had changed everything. Family.